Welcome. You're here because Anne and I are going to talk to you today about the journey of us finishing out this book, this community book. We call it Dare to Ignite Your Dreams. And it's the anthology between all of us immigrants. 10 of us come together, and he's one of those co-author. And she's here joining me right now so we can chat about the journey. Because I would love to hear, and I would love to hear like exactly like how this entire process has been for you. This is kind of like my testimonial, my feedback right now. I get to kind of hear you, what you think about this journey for you and so forth and so on. But
Yeah.
before you do that, you don't mind tell us a little bit about like just like who you are, so forth and so on, so people can get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So I am an empowerment coach and I work on empowering people to really find who they are authentically and live that life authentically. And there are various ways I do that. And when I'm not coaching, I also have a podcast where me and Usher got connected through actually. I put a post on Facebook and you reached out and say, yeah, I've got a podcast called I Love You Want. It starts with you. And Usher very kindly has been a guest of mine as well. Had a great conversation. And I'm also a speaker and an author as well. So a mother of two.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mommy, mommy.
yeah, the mommy. My most important role ever is mommy.
Well, what people don't know about you is that you originally from Kenya. Cause they hear that strong British accent right now. It's like, wait a minute, Anne, where you located at?
That's right. I was born in Kenya. I've moved around quite a lot, actually, but I was born in Kenya. I left when I was 5, lived in Ethiopia for a while, and then in Sweden for a couple of years, and then back to Kenya for a couple of years, then back to Sweden again. And then when I was about 19 years old, I decided I wanted to study in English rather than in Swedish, and I just wanted a change of environment. So I moved down to the UK from Stockholm.
Hmm.
And I thought I'd be here, like do my degree and then go back. And then I went on and did my master's. Then I fell in love with London and I was like, yeah, I'm staying. I love it.
Wait a minute, how many languages do you speak, by the way?
4 fluently. So English, Swahili, which is a national language of in Kenya, and
Mm-hmm.
then my tribal language, Kikuyu, and
Mm-hmm.
then Swedish and a bit of Spanish, but I would say 4 fluently.
And English too, right? Well, it is awesome. This is something I love about most Africans when I meet them, right? They all speak a lot of languages. It seems like learning language becomes a little more easier once you learn one or two, right? You just kind of get a little easier at the process.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think so. I think so in Kenya we have like 42 different tribes. And
Mm,
this is not just a dialect because everyone thinks, what? 42 different tribes? No way. And I'm like, no, it is actually tribes. Some of them you can kind of hear what they're saying, but it's
mm,
actually tribes. The food is different, the tradition is different, the culture is different, people look different.
mm-hmm,
And this is 42 different tribes in one country. And so you have your own, what you call the mother tongue, not the tribe, that language, which is obviously significantly different from other languages. And then you've got Swahili and English as the national languages. So most people in Kenya, obviously depending on your level of education and what part of Kenya you live in, and you'd speak 3 languages.
mm. Well, they're gonna get to know about you in there to ignite your dreams because your story is already a story. Your story was very beautiful, and it was
Thank
a
you.
it was a pleasure, and for like going through the journey with you, getting to know you because I love the saying that says if you really get to know somebody's story, you can't help but to love them.
Hmm.
And once I get to like start reading your story along with everybody else that's in the group reading their story, I'm like, man, I love this. I want to do this for the rest of my life. I want to sit down, look at people's story, and just kind of understand their journey and just kind of keep loving on them, right? So
Hmm.
if you don't mind telling us, because I want to know, right?
Yeah.
I want to know what was this experience like for you, just going through the entire process of writing your story, your journey, taking us to that museum tour that you did, and
Yeah.
show us that beautiful stuff about your life. What was the best part for you?
Oh, I think honestly, Usher, there were so many ups and downs. When we first started talking about this project together,
Mm-hmm.
I never had, I had no clue that I would be challenged as much as I was challenged. There
Mm-hmm.
are moments I'd sit down and I'm writing, and I can tell that I'm writing surface level, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we'd have the bi-weekly meetings and, you would challenge us to like dig deeper. We had the conversations, with the rest of the group on Messenger and people opening up about, dare to be more vulnerable and how it enriches the story. So for me, it was really interesting because the deeper I allowed myself to be vulnerable and stop
Mhm.
holding back,
Mm.
because that's something I have been good at, just as a survival instinct. And you've read my story. There's a couple of nuggets there about, going into survival mode.
Mhm.
But the moment I just let that wall fall and be like, it's okay, Anne,
Mm.
this is going to help somebody else who's probably been there and needs that word of encouragement, needs that word of hope, like, the light at the end of the tunnel.
Mhm.
And when I allowed myself to look at my story from that perspective, there were moments I was pacing up and down. Like I'll take a break and I'm pacing up and down, like, do you really want to do this? Do you really want to do this? Then I'll be like, then what's the point of, writing this book
Mhm.
with the title, Dare to Ignite Your Dreams, if you're not going to dare to be
Mhm.
vulnerable?
Dare to be vulnerable. That's another book title right there. Dare to be vulnerable.
Mm,
Mm. So then if somebody listen to you right now, because you mentioned that, if somebody is going through this process, because oftentimes when you're going through a very difficult thing,
yeah.
for some reason, your brain find a reason to tell you that you're the only one.
Mm,
Even a lot of my challenges over my time, was even what was even in the military too. A lot of my challenges, I thought I was the only one. But even though
mm,
there's a lot of brothers and sisters that went through the same thing, but in your mind at the time, you feel like you're the only one. But when you
yeah.
start opening up and sharing other people, you're like, oh my God, they went through that same thing. Like they got punched in the face by the same obstacle, right?
Yeah.
So what did they do? Like, how did they get through it? And they start talking. It's like, oh, that feels different now. Now I start beating up on myself because in that moment you start telling yourself all kind of things about what it's supposed to be, what it's supposed to be, how perfect it's supposed to be, can't be like this, and that stuff just kind of weighed up. But when you start sharing and see, other people doing the same thing, like, wait a minute, I'm not alone. So what was your not alone moment for you in this journey here?
Oh, my not alone moment was that everyone has struggles and everyone has the ability to beat up on themselves. Like
Mm.
my thing was I can be so critical of myself and I know that and I've people around me like close to me have told me like damn
You a
girl you
perfectionist?
know I am a perfectionist. I think I set certain goals for myself,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately as well, admittedly, around I set certain goals for other people as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not the most patient person when they're not achieving what I have put for them, which is so unfair, right? Like I even hear it as I say it. It's so unfair. So I need to catch myself when I do this. Um, but what was really interesting in terms of, just to answer your question, I think it was just understanding that you are human too, Anne.
Mm.
Like not only did you go through that, maybe you didn't handle it too well.
Mm.
Or maybe those mistakes you kept doing again and again, stop beating yourself up for it so much. Like it's part of the human experience. Like it's past. Learn from it. Let's move on. Because the more you beat yourself over it, it just becomes this vicious cycle where it keeps me trapped in that past rather than letting go and moving on. So there was a lot of like self-forgiveness I had to do as well, actually. Like
Mm.
forgiving myself for the lack of self-grace that I showed myself
Mm.
and understanding everyone can make mistakes. You're also human. Like chill, you know? Um, so that was sobering. And I loved what you said as well, Asher, about, when you start sharing the stories and you realize that you're not alone, it makes
Mm.
it so much easier to go through those moments.
Mm.
I'll just talk about vulnerability. I'll give an example. Something like miscarriage is not something that people talk a lot about. And
Mhm.
when I went through it, I thought I was alone. I was like, I've not heard anyone else go through this. Oh my God, is there something wrong with me? I start questioning my body and all of that. And, we know logically it's not
Mm.
you who's caused it. For whatever reason, the pregnancy wasn't meant to go through. It's interesting we talk about this when the US elections are just happening, have just happened, with, women's health being one of the
Mm-hmm.
contesting issues, to say the least. But the point I was trying to make is that when I started actually talking about the pain and the sorrow and the loss and the heartache that I was suffering, other women started saying, actually, I've gone through that too.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I've gone through that too. And then I realized the statistics here in the UK anyway is about 1 to 4 or 1 to 3 every pregnancy actually ends up in a miscarriage. But if I didn't have these conversations, if I didn't dare to tell my story, these other women as well, perhaps, I can't speak for them, but I don't know how many times they have had that opportunity to share that story.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts a healing process. If anything, just to know that there's nothing quote unquote wrong with you. And again, it is an unfortunate human experience.
Mm. You know, I'm gonna tell you something that I recognize. It took me 3 books to get there, but it took you 1 book to get there, by the way. Writing a memoir. When you said yes to that, when I asked you said yes, I'm like, oh, and it's really brave. Because when I first wrote my first book, I wasn't ready to write my story. I trying to find a way to make it fictional, non-fictional. I trying to play with it a little bit, right?
Mm.
But then I wrote my second book was like a guided journal. When I went to my third book, it was also still another book that's not complete my story. Then my editor was like, Asher, what about your story? And in that moment, I felt less insecure about writing, and I decided I'm gonna share. So I'm thinking a lot of people are very insecure about sharing a story. And you said something like, how many times those women had an opportunity to share and they didn't? How many times you had an opportunity to share something about you that so valuable, but you didn't do it because you wasn't feeling courageous to do it. So just by putting your story together, your memoir, and say, I'm going to share these things, that's very courageous. Not a lot of people have the courage to do it. So I just want to congratulate you for doing that, my friend.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm,
I think there's so many, just reading all the other co-authors we have on this project, there's 8 of us, outside the 2 of us, there's 10 of us in
mm-hmm,
total. And
mm-hmm,
just looking at their stories as well and realizing the journeys they have gone through to be where they are, it's
mm-hmm,
so fascinating. It is so fascinating how, as you were saying before, how you get to know someone on a whole different level.
mm-hmm.
And it's not that you didn't respect them, but there's a whole level of respect and love that
Yes.
comes. Like,
Yes.
wow. And here you are,
Mm-hmm,
turning up the way you turn up
mm-hmm,
every day. Yeah, it's mind-blowing when we get to share our stories. And sometimes it doesn't need to be like super dramatic or, super um heartbreaking or a certain struggle. Sometimes it's just, I think even the vulnerability of going,
mm-hmm,
you know, yeah, I went through this and or I went through that.
mm.
And as you're saying, knowing that you're not alone, having some more self-grace for yourself. When you did things, you're like, oh, that was not a nice thing of me to do. Or that was embarrassing, or that was a shady move.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, but going back to be like, okay, not
mm.
my cutest moment, but I can have some more self-grace for myself, being
So if
human.
somebody listen to this right now
Mm.
and you want to, get them some more information about just why they should read your book, why they should read your story, why they should read the entire like collection of these books that we're gonna put out together. Like what would be your biggest takeaway from just the process of doing this for yourself that people need to understand how that or cathartic that was for you, if you gotta share that.
I think it was very cathartic, kind of like I mentioned, it almost felt like I was it was therapy in my book. Like you're going through, it's basically like being a little fly, on a wall in my own therapy sessions with my therapist, but it's just me speaking and the therapist is completely silent.
Mm-hmm.
But what you will learn though, and I think what the takeaway is for the readers, and I say this, I think across everybody's story, is the ability to see that you are actually so much stronger than you
Mm-hmm.
think.
Mm-hmm.
And I totally believe this, that the best is still ahead of you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a person of faith. Excuse me. I'm a person of faith, and I believe that God created us uniquely with all our own unique purposes, our talents, our gifts.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so important that we try and tap into what is our purpose while we're here and really live life from that perspective rather than just coasting subconsciously or mindlessly through life and igniting that within
Mm-hmm.
you and seeing how your life dramatically changes when you're living a purposeful life. And it could be anything. It like your gift, Usher, is to bring people together,
Mm-hmm.
collect people's stories. You've managed this thing amazingly well. Like, I salute you. And I think that's one of your gifts, actually, even your patience and
Mm-hmm.
your ability to read people's story and, challenge us to go deeper, to encourage us to like stick to the deadlines, and we got this and all. And that's a gift and that's a talent. And I can even like I know even when looking at you, the energy that comes out of you when you're running this project, I love it. I love it. There's a whole different vibe and energy. So I think I would ask people as they read through everyone's stories, just ask yourself as well if you could push yourself to be a bit more vulnerable in this life, what would you go for? You've not dared to do before, if you could be a little bit more brave at the same time, if you could be living a life of purpose,
You
what would
know,
that look like?
mm, you mentioned faith. I'm spiritual too, so I'm gonna use a Bible reference here.
Hmm.
And when you say that your personal faith, I thought about if God see it fit for him to write a book, right, for us to know about him, I think we all should write a book for people to know about us. And if he saw that it was a need for Wright putting what we need to know about him in words in a book,
Mhm.
I think we should look at the same way. We need to put what we need to put about us in books, in words, so other people can get to know us, right? So there's
Yeah.
two ways to get to know me personally, but you can also read about me too. And God saw it was fit to do the same thing. So I was thinking about it when you was talking. I was like, yeah, we gotta do it. Memoir is important because your memoir is your story, your intellectual property, your history, and you get to share that with other people so they can get to know you. Because I
Yeah.
get to know you so well over these last few months, and I was like, yeah, ain't no way I can't love her just based on what I know about her, right? I can't like Anna, based on the situation you've been through, right? Your obstacles you face and decision you make. If I was in the same situation, I would make some of the same decision too. Therefore, I can't judge you. I only gotta respect you and I love you, right? And that's what happens when people get to read other people's story. Like, oh yeah, why am I being so judgmental? If I was the same person, probably do the same thing too.
Mm.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right? I love that. Like, it really also gets people to stop being so judgmental.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And like, when you read other people's stories, you hear other people's struggles, you
Mm-hmm.
see their journey. Like when I read yours as well, Asha, I learned so much about you.
Mm-hmm.
And even if I never judged you in any kind of manner, there was a whole level of respect. Like I respected you already, but you know what I mean? It was
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
wow.
Mm-hmm.
And here you are doing what you're doing, overcome all those obstacles. And again, as well as you said as well, you being vulnerable enough to write about it, because your
Mm-hmm.
book was very raw as well. And I loved that. It was
Mm-hmm.
such a beautiful read. And I think having looked at it, like everyone's stories as well, is like, how can you not love them?
Mm-hmm.
They've poured their soul and their heart into this.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's taken a moment of being brave, a bit of uncomfortableness at times,
Mm-hmm.
but just remembering, the other thing I wanted to say, actually, going back to the point of faith, and my last chapter actually is called God and Gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
And I really believe that, no one's here by accident.
Mm-hmm.
No one's here. We are all here by God's design. You want to call it the universe or whatever you want to call it. This, just talking about my own personal faith. But I believe that God created us all uniquely and beautifully in his image.
Mm-hmm.
So no matter what people are going through, what I'd love for them to take as they read these stories of, all these 10 authors, all these 10 immigrants who are now entrepreneurs running their own business and quite frankly doing well in life. And I'm not
Mhm.
talking about just materialistically, but I'm talking about mentally, emotionally,
Mhm.
um, is that your best is still ahead of you. And I really believe that. I believe like if I'm still breathing, if I'm still waking up, is because God has better days ahead for me. He's got bigger things and more things of me to fulfill.
Mm. This was a humbling experience for me, by the way. I don't know when everybody turning all this stuff and I got everything organized. I'm like, man, I had tears in my eyes, hand, because I was like, I want to do this as many times as possible going forward because this was such a really good experience. And when I see like a lot of people was taking what was considered like a big ass boulder and like really transform it into like a pebble that you can carry, because oftentimes your stories just feel so heavy when we go back and look at it. I'm like, wait a minute, I can transform this thing into a pebble. Because when it happened to me, I might be 12 years old, right? I was young. My mind was young. I didn't have a lot of perspective on life. But no, I'm older. I have a lot more perspective on life. I go back and look at the same situation. It's small now, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know that until I go revisit it and
Hmm.
look at it again. Like, wait a minute, I'm a grown man looking at a small thing. It's not that bad. It's not that scary. It looked like a big rock, but it's a small pebble. I can carry it. I can transform it into something smaller. And that's what happened. I see with a lot of you guys' story. I'm like, wait a minute. Even when I was working with Colleen too, right? And Dr. Colleen, she's my Jamaican sister too, right? We were just going
Yeah.
back and forth with her story.
Yeah.
And I saw she was like, one moment she's kind of tears. She was, Ash, I can't read them. Can you read? Can you finish reading for me? Right? We were going through the process, but we were talking about her story with her mom, and that was very deep, man. Very deep. I could see the shift happen based on when she was going back looking at the words. I was like, oh yeah, it means a lot. So a lot of stuff happened for a lot of us. So I appreciate you, my sister.
I
This was a
appreciate you, my brother.
yes.
I think we're all so grateful for Yasha. Seriously.
Hmm.
What you've created here is beautiful
Hmm.
and you've managed it beautifully and with the patience of a saint.
Yeah, I like in this movie with Shaft, right? I'm gonna give you a joke before we close. I think this movie with Shaft, one of the old Shaft movies. It was Samuel Jackson, and it's one guy who was a Spanish guy in the movie. But it was like, well, anyway, his line was, "I have patience longer than train smoke," right? So when I first heard, I was like, "Oh, I'm take that line with me. I got patience longer than train smoke. I can wait. I can
Yeah,
sit and just watch the thing process out, right?" But yeah,
I love
yeah,
that. Yeah, might steal that one too.
yeah. Got patience longer than train smoke, buddy. Cool. All right, Han. Well, for the folks that are getting this thing information live, we're gonna put this up on the site as well for people to kind of like get to know you a bit before they go in and jump into your pages. Like, this is Han. Get to meet Han and see what Han is like. But then you get to go read about Han on your own time. And when the audiobook comes out, you get to go listen to Han's story along with all the other folks' story that's in her version of the book. And I'm looking forward to see where we go from here, Anne. Any last word?
Absolutely. Just massive thank you, Usher, again, for, creating this beautiful project. I'm super excited about it,
Mhm.
and I can't wait for the launch on the 5th of December.
Yes, party time.
Yeah.
All right. All right. With
All
that,
right.
folks, enjoy the
Thank
day.
you,
Make it
everyone.
awesome.